Okay, so here's the plan. I have the new solenoid, and it matches the old one perfectly. I'll probably use the old nuts, that's why I doubled them up in the end. But here's the starter, and I've got to hook the plunger here, this plastic plunger. I have to hook that on the end of the Bendix yoke there. So somehow that's supposed to drop in there, and it's going to be really tight. I actually think I have to turn this 90 degrees because that's going to be, it won't fit like that. But yeah, so it's going to be a lot of wiggling and jostling. What I did was I brought a rubber band and this piece of string. I'm going to try to loop it around the bottom of the yoke, run it out the bottom of the solenoid underneath on top of the starter housing here, and pull on it to hold that open, because normally you'd have the starter off the tractor and you'd have it in a vise or something, and you could just pull the gear out with your fingers or something, or make clamp it, and that way it's not going to move. But I can't do that because I haven't pulled the starter, and the goal is to not pull the starter. So we'll see how this works. Honestly, it'll be tricky even with the starter on a vise, because you still have to mess with the whole thing. You just be able to access the gear and the other end of that lever a little bit more directly than having to pull it with some string. But otherwise, it's kind of the same thing. And frankly, it's already in a vise effectively, right? So I guess I'm just going to mess with it and see what I can do here. All right, I had the rubber band in there, but the boot that goes on the end of the plunger was getting bound up. It's supposed to slip inside of the cone here, and maybe it would fit in, but it was getting all bunched up, and I'm sure the rubber band's not helping. But it turns out the original one is actually a smaller diameter. You can see if I kind of line them up how much wider. Look at the, or maybe if I try it like this, see how much wider that is on the bottom there? That side's about even, maybe like that, and the bottom is wider. So I'm going to try the original cap, dust cover there. Alright, so that slipped in really nice. The boot slipped right in there, and the rubber band's there, so all I have to do now is cut the rubber band and push it in and install my nuts. So that went really well. Alright, she's on. Got these nuts on over here. Got the battery lug on. I have the solenoid power wire, and then I've got the actual starter feed on the output of the solenoid there. So this should be good. All I have to do now is reconnect the battery and try this thing out. Alright, I promise I haven't tried it yet, so if this goes poorly, it's going to go poorly on video. So here we go with the key. Should crank. Nice. Oh, now it's not cranking anymore at all. What's going on? Oh, that's weird. Is it locked out? Well, guess I get to diagnose that. So I didn't find the problem yet, but there is a moral here. One thing I didn't check when I diagnosed this was the feed to the solenoid from the ignition switch through all the wiring harness and safety switches that this thing has. This is not consistent. It's basically, this thing is exhibiting the same behavior as the other one. So I think either the other one wasn't broken, or it's possible that because it has occasional weak pull-in power that the contacts still arced. That is possible, and then kind of fried it. And in fact, that'll happen here unless I can get this thing to consistently grab. But everything's working, and if I actually short this lug here to the solenoid input, it works great, which I wish I tried on the old solenoid. That was my bad, incomplete diagnostic. If that worked every time, I would have said, oh, it's a supply problem. So basically, I can't do this all in one hand, but if I try to, maybe I can. So if I hold this test light right on here, like this, can I do this? Or maybe I can jam it in something. Can I jam it in? Not really. I don't know. I don't want to short it on the... Come on now. Yeah, so I need to hold this and then be able to crank it. What I'll show. All right, let's see if this works. Now it's actually working better. I don't know if this really helped anything, so I sprayed deoxit on the end of that connector, checked it. I broke this connector harness apart and deoxed the whole. When I say deoxit, I'm talking about this stuff here. This stuff is pretty good. So I cleaned that. The pins looked fine. I pulled off the bottom of the ignition switch right in there. The pins looked fine. I sprayed deoxit in there anyway. So if there's an issue with the supply here, it's somewhere else in the chain through all the safety switches. I mean, it could even have a loose fuse that's just making contact just enough. I mean, I need to check some stuff. I don't even know where the fuses are in this thing. That's the instrument cluster bulbs, I think. Where are the fuses on this? I don't know. I see the battery thing is pulled off there. I don't think there's a battery issue with this. I mean, I'm sure this thing isn't mint, but jumping it seemed to work because it boosted the voltage up to, you know, whatever 14 volts, which was enough, and that was my experience too. But I don't think battery's not why this is being consistent here. So I'm gonna keep playing with it, but I'm gonna probably have to look up a wiring diagram and understand all the different places that wire goes and what's in line with the signal, and figure out why sometimes it's low voltage. And I could get my multimeter and actually figure out what the voltage drop is when it's misbehaving, just to get an idea of what I'm tracing here. It's too low for it to make a connection though, that's for sure. All right, so confirmed here, when it doesn't crank, the input power to the solenoid, the signal wire there, drops to 6 volts. When it does crank, I saw it more like 9, but there's still a voltage drop problem. So it may very well have baked the contacts in the old solenoid by not pulling it in firmly and arced. So that's interesting, although I wonder if it would have worked fine if I just resolved this problem. So yeah, why does it drop to 6 volts sometimes and other times it doesn't? Like that would be 6 volts. I can play with the battery cable, I guess, while I'm cranking. I played with some stuff and I didn't really get any response. Okay, so it's not really a power feed issue. I checked the voltage of the main battery lug there that runs directly to the battery. It's hot all the time. That only drops to like 11.9. The battery's got like 12.3, 12.4 resting. It was 12.5 before I did all this cranking. And it drops to 11.9 when cranking. That drops to 6. So it has nothing to do with the battery or battery cables or anything. It has to do with the solenoid control wire, which goes, you know, again, from the ignition switch through all the safeties. You know, there's fuses probably, and then it eventually gets down to the starter and it decides to send a signal. So that's my issue. It's not battery cables or anything like that. I guess theoretically could be the ignition switch or anything in the circuit. I really haven't narrowed it down at all yet, but it's interesting. I still wonder if the old one would have worked fine, but I guess I'll keep it as a spare. Sucks. Okay, so haven't made any progress, but I have done something. So I cleaned the solenoid spade connector there on the starter. I took this harness apart and cleaned it. I took the ignition switch plug off and cleaned it. I took the PTO switch plug off and cleaned it. And I took the brake switch plug off and cleaned it right here. That guy. Really still just inconsistent. Sometimes it cranks, sometimes it doesn't. So it's really doing exactly what it did before. So I need to find a wiring diagram, which I have, and look up where else in the chain. I have not managed to find any fuses in here. I don't know what's going on with the fuses or any other control panel, or frankly what other interlocks there are. I'm not sure there really are any other interlocks. It doesn't need the seat to crank, obviously. That's a PTO thing, or a get off the seat if the brake isn't on, kind of thing. But yeah, I have to find out where the other interlocks are or where the wire goes and maybe there's just a corroded wire that sometimes lets current through and sometimes doesn't. I mean, I wiggled everything up here. I wiggled. I even wiggled this sketchy crap on here, which I don't know what that even is, but wiggling that doesn't change anything. I guess I could take off those connectors. I don't know why they're on there or where they go. Actually, wait a minute. This one, okay, so here's an accessory 12 volt plug. You know what? That's what that is. That's what one of those is. The other one is this, which goes to I don't know, something up here. Oh, the wiper. It's the wiper. So that's another accessory item, the windshield wiper. Nothing to do with anything. Okay, not my issue. Good. So it's the wiper and the 12 volt accessory plug. That's what those two are. So yeah, I don't know if there's another connector or fuse box or anything else, a switch. I even screwed around with that. I didn't really unplug it and plug it back in, but I jiggled them and nothing changed. I'll try unplug it and plug it back in, I guess. I'm sure it won't make a difference. It's just a breaker, I think, for the solenoid. Yeah, that didn't help. I pulled off the breaker plugs and put the deoxit on them, my favorite. Didn't make a difference. Sometimes it cranks, sometimes it doesn't. See? So the proper way to diagnose this is to figure out where the voltage drop is. It's intermittent, so it's going to suck, but I've got 6.5, 6.3 volts to that solenoid in there, the feed, when it doesn't crank. So I can figure out which pin on the ignition switch, for example, feeds the solenoid, which is crank, and check for voltage drop. If I have a voltage drop, the problem is upstream, closer to the battery, basically. And if I do not have a voltage drop, then the problem is downstream from there, closer to the starter. So that is the correct way to diagnose this, is just to check all the way along the line and figure out where the voltage drop actually occurs. Right, so by process of elimination, if I have a voltage drop, or if I don't have a voltage drop at the ignition switch, but I do somewhere else, then I know it's between those two areas, and I just have to figure out where in the wiring harness there's a plug or a switch or something that's not working right. So it's a little tedious, a little easier said than done, but that is the process. You don't have to pull your hair out. There is a process to doing this. You could also use a piercing probe, which I guess I don't have, and that would speed this up greatly. You just find the right blue wire. This is blue down here, I guess, but wherever it is, I don't know if it's blue the whole way. I'll look at a diagram and find out, and you could pierce and figure out your way. I may end up having to take some of this loom apart. We'll see. I'll get it. I wonder what the issue is, and I wonder if that solenoid, the old one, actually worked fine, even though I think it probably didn't like some of the arcing that probably happened from not pulling the plunger in all the way, because the current, it couldn't sustain the current needed, and the voltage drops again. But it's so weird that it's intermittent. That is strange.